Tong. He's a forensic consultant and expert witness, author of the books Elusive Innocence, Survival Guide for the Falsely Accused, Ashes to Ashes, Families to Dust, False Accusations of Child Abuse, Don't Blame Me, Daddy, False Accusations of Child Sexual Abuse, and Love and Loathing, Protecting Your Mental Health and Legal Rights When Your Partner Has Borderline Personality Disorder. His website is abuseexcuse.com. Welcome to the show, Mr. Tong.
Thanks for having me this afternoon.
It's great to have you on. It's a very interesting subject to me. In a couple of ways, I've known people who have children who have been the victims, basically, of Child Protective Services harassment, and at the same time, I also close acquaintances of mine, anyway, people close to me, have adopted a young child who was to be raised by a couple of worthless crackheads, and the state took that little baby away and gave her to someone who can do a much better job of raising that kid. So being a libertarian and an anti-government extremist in all capacities, I'm very conflicted about this topic. So I'm really glad I could have you on to maybe help flesh out some of these arguments. First of all, I'd like to ask you, sir, how exactly did you get into this subject? I sort of get the impression that a personal experience of yours kind of pushed you this direction. Is that correct?
Yeah, I basically was accused by my ex-wife 20 years ago of molesting my 3-year-old daughter, and that's how I got involved. It was a horrific ordeal that cost my family $150,000. We went through 7 different attorneys, 7 psychologists, 6 different courts, in 10 years of litigation. I was arrested, had to clear my name down here in Florida. Couldn't see either of my children, including my son, who I wasn't even accused of abusing, for over a year. I found out very quick 20 years ago, and if you asked me then if I thought this was going to be a problem today, that I'd be talking to you, I'd think you're delusional. That you were presumed guilty and you had to prove your innocence. You had to prove you weren't the monster that they were paying you to be, and here's why not. This is the opposite maxim in America, the opposite of our Constitution, of course. But that's what's going on here. This is Uncle Sam at its finest.
There's really nothing worse than to be accused of molesting a child.
Well, and I'm not putting any, I'm not taking away from the fact that abuse is a problem. Certainly, we see 3 million reports of alleged child abuse and neglect in America every year, of which about 1 million are confirmed cases. But that's a very high false positive error rate. 2/3 of these cases are unfounded or false. Now, these are not my statistics. These are the Department of Health and Human Services right from Washington, D.C., so folks can go to my website at abuse-excuse.com, and about halfway down the page, they'll see the link.
Okay, hold it right there. Dean Tong, he's an author and forensic consultant. The website is Abuse Excuse. Now, Mr. Tong, probably, 5 or 6 years ago, me and my favorite auntie were walking through the grocery store, and a little girl started crying and saying, "I can't find my mommy, I can't find my mommy." And I began to walk over toward the little girl, and my auntie grabbed my arm, and she said, "Don't you do that. Times have changed. When I was a little girl, if something like that happened, of course, you run up, you grab the little girl, you help her find her mommy, and everything is fine. But these days, you would be making a terrible, terrible mistake to do that. If you're really concerned about the little girl, what you should do is stand 100 feet away and make sure nobody else kidnaps her until her mommy shows up. But don't you touch her, because you're putting yourself in grave danger."
Yeah, that's correct. We're living in no-touch rules America 2005. You can wind up like Michael Jackson in a situation like that. So this is basically what's called in the law in loco parentis parens patriae. The state is parental babysitters. If you read the book, It Takes a Village by Hillary Clinton.
The state as parental babysitters.
Yeah, basically, my point is your kids are not your kids. They're the state's kids, and they are raised by the state. At any time, an anonymous phone call can be made, and the Department of Protective and Regulatory Services, what's now called the Department of Family and Protective Services in Texas, can come in without your say-so and can knock on your door and say, "I want to see your child." Now, they can do that either at the school or at your house, and if you refuse to let them in, by God, they will get a warrant. They will get the authorities to let themselves in. And, of course, if you then resist, they'll take you in for obstruction of justice or whatever they want to conjure up. So they can make a mountain out of a molehill, and they oftentimes do. So we see both sides of the coin. We see the system charged to protect children at risk not doing that to the point where kids die, especially in my state of Florida, to the other side where witch hunts are conducted. And, of course, we've had several examples of those since I went through my ordeal 20 years ago. I'm talking about McMartin, California, to most recently Wenatchee in Washington. And then, of course, you get the other side where you get pedophilia covered up, for example, within the Catholic Church.
Well, and to be fair, obviously, when CPS lets a kid stay in an abusive situation, a kid ends up dying of it, or when perfectly okay parents get their kids taken, that's what gets all the coverage. Clearly, there are times when the CPS does their job right?
Absolutely. There are many good social workers out there. There are good sex crime detectives. There are good child protective investigators. Unfortunately, however, you do get many that are undertrained and don't have the education to know the difference in child development and child pathology. What is abuse? What isn't abuse? I had a case one time where, and by the way, I've been hired in these cases, and they're from 41 states by parents and attorneys as a trial consultant. But I had a case where a little girl said that her daddy put his pee-pee on her pee-pee, and, of course, the guy was in jail when I was retained in the case. And what the little girl meant was not that daddy's genitalia touched her genitalia, but that he urinated on top of her urine in the commode she forgot to flush.
Oh, nice.
Now, this is a linguistic error, but this happens more often than not, especially with very young children, the ages 3 to 5. Very suggestible, impressionable kids. We basically are misconstruing what they're trying to tell us.
It's interesting, if you were to listen to Loveline with Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew on the average night, you might get the impression that everybody rapes their kids. I mean, those kids call in. I've listened to that show quite a few times.
We're very sensitized to these issues in America. This is a very socialized institution in this country. My wife is Vietnamese, and so they have to worry about putting rice and food on the table over there, more so than the government making sure that the house is clean and that the kids look nice and well clothed and everything else. This is a very, very top issue in this country, and the thing that I have a problem with, of course, is the bottom line money factor. This is not just a child protection agency. It is an industry. It is an establishment. I've always said that if we took the profit away from child protection, the solution would go a long way towards correcting itself.
Well, they have a monopoly, and they have the same problem of all government agencies. The market does not rule what they do. They get paid anyway, whether what they do is right or wrong. They're getting paid with tax money that we don't have a choice but to pay them, and so they suck. But that makes them the same as every other government agency. So how do we set up a CPS system that will get it right?
Well, we first have to go back to the drawing board, Scott. That's going to necessitate a national task force to examine where it was, where it is, and how we fix it to where we should be going. It's the same thing that I basically do when I get involved in a case, when I have to work with legal counsel. That's why there's a section in my book, How to Choose Your Attorney. Not many lawyers know how to successfully try and litigate these cases. Same thing here with CPS. The average caseworker is running probably 30 to 40 cases a month, which is double the average national cap, which is supposed to be between 10 and 15. So they just don't have the time, per person to be able to do the work that they need to do and get it done within 30 days. Basically, every allegation that comes into the toll-free hotline number or 911, which necessitates the presence of Child Protective Services or the authorities, requires an investigation. Somebody has got to go out to make sure that that child is safe and not in imminent danger. And, of course, that requires paperwork. It requires the bureaucracy to basically get going. So I think we need a national task force to examine the statistics, the data. Now we already have. I think we need professionals like Doug Bezherov from the American Enterprise Institute, perhaps Richard Wexler from the National Coalition of Child Protection Reform to look at this on a national scale And then basically, we need to very much look at the repealing and abrogating the Mondale Act, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, CAPTA, from 1974, from 30 years ago, which of course was named after former Vice President Walter Mondale, because this was the cancer that got this wound to be, to basically metastasize like cancer and spread like wildfire.
Well, hang on, let me stop you right there, because I was about to say, when you talk about having a national task force, I was going to say nationalizing this problem was a big part of what made it the crisis that it is today, right? The Mondale Act.
You've got to have national experts to look at the overall big picture.
Well, if you have a national commission, they're going to recommend national solutions.
Well, and you have to do that because CAPTA is a federal law, so the only way to repeal CAPTA is to invoke another federal law.
Okay. Yeah, it's too bad the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions on nullification.
You're not going to do this on a 50-state level. It's going to be done nationally, and then that national law is going to filter down to all 50 states. That's the way it works in this country.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, so, all right, first of all, how did the Mondale Act precipitate the problem, and why would repealing it be the solution?
Well, because that law basically gave CPS omnipotent power. It gave them the power to investigate. It gave them total immunity. In other words, you couldn't sue them unless they acted in bad faith with premeditation, with malice, which it's very unusual to get a lawsuit, a successful lawsuit against Child Protective Services. And then, of course, they could take these anonymous phone calls where if you were not a mandated reporter, a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, or a teacher, or a police officer, any layperson could call and remain totally anonymous and ruin your life.
Uh-huh.
So this was the law that basically took place right after former Governor Reagan passed the Equal Rights Amendment in 1969 in California. And, of course, 1974 was also the time when feminism, really grew widespread throughout the United States, about the same time. Of course, 20 years later, in 1994, former President Clinton passed the Violence Against Women's Act, which was basically the domestic violence version of this Child Abuse Act from 74.
Okay, now, and another thing that it did also was it provided national government subsidies to state and local police agencies who could show that their numbers of child abuse cases were increasing and that kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. That's an excellent point. And very much, again, like I alluded to earlier, this is money engineered and money driven. So certainly, if they can falsely inflame the statistics, they're going to get the money.
Right. Well, let's break this down a little bit for somebody who may not quite understand. You run the CPS in Iowa somewhere, and they come to you and say, listen, we'll give you millions and millions of dollars if you can only find us 3 more cases of child abuse in your county. Well, guess what? They go out and they find 3 more cases. One way or another, they're going to find cases.
Absolutely. And I've had cases for something as frivolous and trivial as lice in a child's hair or a dirty house. And I'm talking about allegations now to very graphic allegations of alleged anal sodomy or shaken baby syndrome and everything in between. So anything like that from they are forced to come out and examine the situation to make sure the child, this is not a family reunification system. This is a child protection system. This is their utmost and foremost goal. Yes, under the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997, they do have to make reasonable efforts to reunify the family, but make no mistake, their original goal, their only goal really, is to make sure the child is safe and out of harm's way.
And that their own job continues to exist forever.
Absolutely.